The little cuttlefish, Cephalopod atlantica, is, as its common name quite adequately states, very small, with a maximum length of 3 centimetres. Its coloration signals that this one is feeling comfortable. This is what a little cuttlefish looks like when upset, in this case because a curious human wanted to have a look at it. Rosie is particularly good at spotting and catching these tiny cephalopods and has been able to observe these little cuttles on 3 occasions. Many are no larger than a bumblebee, which they quite resemble as they buzz along in the shallows at low tide. Spotting them is one thing, catching them more of a challenge. This one was deftly scooped up in a large seashell and retained its comfort livery until prodded, angrily darkening in an instant and squirting a tiny plume of ink. Rosie caught this full-size specimen at Ballycall in the Scottish Highlands. It darkened in an instant as it was picked up and stayed that way throughout its photo session. On release, it shot away, hopefully relaxing and changing back to its proper colour pattern, better camouflaged against the shell sand seabed. The differences in its expanded chromatophores, compared with the relaxed specimen, show clearly on its head and fins, while those on its eyes and mantle have coalesced. An important character that differentiates this species from other little ones is the mantle fused to the back of the head. Checking this feature usually requires a lot of prodding, but this picture shows it well without bothering the little cuttle any further. The chromatophores on the underside have expanded less than above, and here we can see the cuttlefish's propulsion mechanism, the siphon. Of course, pointing in that direction means that it swims, to our way of thinking, backwards. It has already squirted some ink and consequently did so again. We had no idea that squid ink was viscous, indeed quite stringy. When Rosie once again encountered a tiny sepiola, she followed it calmly with her smartphone in its waterproof casing. The cuttle retained its composure and normal coloration, and then performed in a way that none of us could have predicted. Well, that's his pale background.
Yes.
Part of the repertoire.
Look at those eyes. Oh, he's burying. You're not going to get me, you know. Look at that.
Hey, are you filming?
Oh. Yep.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, look at that.
Going. He's got his eyes out. Going.
Oh, he's wiped his eye.
Nearly. Oh, look
he's
at that.
covering himself up.
He's pulling. Look at those.
Yeah.
Look at that. Can you see that, Pat? Yeah. The tentacles coming out and drawing up. Oh, that is just incredible.
Next, an unforgettable encounter with a relatively large cuttlefish known to some people as a stout bobtail. It's about 10 times the size of our little cuttle. In truth, it found me on the Lochhouse shore at Nosty, attracting my attention by the noise it made as it tried utterly in vain to right itself and get afloat. It was actually lying on its back in a small sand pool, completely abandoned by the tide. In its desperation, it was rounding itself up and then elongating, spitting most of the air from its siphon. It had run out of water, but to no effect. It was doomed to desiccation, or if a passing gull noticed it, to become a meal. Rescue became the priority. Before taking it the 50 or more metres to the sea, I swiftly examined and photographed it, first turning it the right way up. I suppose it was exhausted, and it had darkened in its despair. Here top right is a calm Rossier. It was soon back in the water, but while I was with it, it never lost its panic coloration. However, once back in the loch, it seemed reluctant to leave its rescuer and headed swiftly towards me. It grasped my boot and climbed aboard. Did I really sense intelligence behind those beautiful blue eyes? My new friend took quite a bit of persuading to let go, and I had to be firm. Once I'd detached it, I said a reluctant goodbye and hurried away landward. Not a cuttlefish this time, but another of our native cephalopods, the curled octopus Elidone cirrhosa. I was wading at low tide with the water almost trickling over the tops of my wellies when I spotted this marvellous animal. As I took photos, tricky because it's not an underwater camera, it did just as my Rossier friend had done, it clamped onto my welly. It had a mighty grip and was very difficult to dislodge while I was standing on one leg in welly-deep seawater taking amusing photos. But we eventually parted, and I was left with the memory of a remarkable encounter